So thank you all. So thank you all for being here today for A Tale of Two Counties, which is presented by the Nutrition, Obesity, Health Equity, and Food Justice, or NOHE Research Group at the University of Illinois at Chicago. My name is Marjorie Kirsten, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the project lead for this project, and Dr. Hughes-Jones should be joining us shortly. She is the principal investigator for the project, and it looks like she's on now. So she'll be providing us with a brief introduction about NOHE as well as the iSpan Breastfeeding Equity Project. Before we jump into that, I just wanted to share the agenda. So we'll start with a welcome and an introduction of our speaker, and then we're going to move into a presentation by Ms. Janel Hughes-Jones, and then we'll move to closing and a feedback survey. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hughes-Jones for a brief introduction of NOHE and the iSpan Breastfeeding Equity Project.
So much, Marjorie. Welcome. We are really excited about the webinar today. I'm the director of the Nutrition, Obesity, and Health Equity Research Laboratory at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and associate professor in the Department of Kinesiology and Nutrition. We have been part of the iSpan project, which is focused on breastfeeding equity across the state, and our focus is on Cook County. And so this is part of a series of other activities that we have developed in collaboration with community partners to really spread the message around human milk feeding equity and looking more at how we support communities. We have some community-based organizations that received a small amount of funding to really move the needle when we look at supporting communities of color in being able to breast or chest feed and just increase the number of infants that have access to human milk. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I just want to thank you so much for joining. As part of this project, we're also launching a statewide landscape scan to understand more about what types of activities and strategies are being used in communities of color to support birthing families. So I'm going to turn it back over to Marjorie.
Great, thanks, Dr. Hughes-Jones. So I'd like to introduce our presenter today, who is Ms. Janel Hughes-Jones. We're very excited to have her on. Janel Hughes-Jones is a bilingual breastfeeding peer counselor with 18 plus years of experience working to improve breastfeeding equity in Illinois. Her peer counselor journey began with the birth of her son in 1994 as a teen mom, and she has since worked for the Will County Department of Public Health and Evanston Hospital. Janel became an IBCLC from 2011 to 2016. Ms. Hughes-Jones has participated in a number of breastfeeding equity projects, including the How to Build Breastfeeding Community Task Force, the Blueprint for Breastfeeding, and the Milk of Life. In 2006, she facilitated the establishment of breast pumping sites at 3 Joliet Junior College locations. Janel has served on the Community Health Worker section of the American Public Health Association, Joliet Alliance of Breastfeeding Advocates, and the Birth Equity Leadership Academy. So we're so excited to have Janel here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Janel to share her slides and kick us off. Oh, Janel, you're muted. Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for having me. I'm super excited for the opportunity, and it was nice to see all the familiar names doing great things for breastfeeding equity in Illinois, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. I'll be talking today about my experiences with promoting breastfeeding equity in 2 different counties spanning 18 years. I'll share a couple initiatives where I collaborated with community-based organizations, healthcare providers, and the Joliet Junior College project. And I'll also show how I use photo narratives of classroom and breast milk production to encourage my patients, to hand express or pump. I also use them for education. And then I get permission to post those same photos on social media to create awareness of some of the breastfeeding issues that patients deal with, and to make people from hospitals aware, seek donations and build capacity for with my network to garner donated incentives for the patients that I encourage and support. Oh, okay. So I'll get started. My breastfeeding class, I receive breastfeeding equity, and I also provide breastfeeding equity. At the breastfeeding class, I think I won a prize for answering one of the questions correctly, and it was the Breastfeeding Answer Book by Nancy Moorbacher. I read it from cover to cover, and I also received the Loving Support Model training, and then I was employed from 1995 to 1996. And my boss at the time, Ruth Forney, which some of you are probably familiar with her name, she's since retired. She allowed me to bring my son to work with me for 4 to 6 hour shifts a week. It was awesome. And I gave prenatal mini breastfeeding educations in the waiting area at WIC, provided postpartum follow-up, and from the referral sheets that we received, and a few times I was able to give latch help. So I'm really big on this topic, non-traditional PM and weekend hours for anybody working in equity, because I quit breastfeeding on a Sunday for 8 hours because so I could take pain medication. Prior to quitting, I had called 5 different locations and received different answers from every location. I was told to stop breastfeeding by one of the people, and that's the one that I took their advice. So I quit for 8 hours, and then I became engorged and had a fever of 101.1. I received a call from my peer counselor at 8 p.m. on a Sunday, and she looked up my medication in the Medication and Mother's Breast Milk book and told me that was fine for me to breastfeed. I thought that was kind of crazy that all of the other places that I had contacted didn't know what the safety rating was and didn't have access to the book. So they used to put that book in the lactation consultant's office, and it was locked. So nobody from the hospital floors had access to it. So because that happened to me, it led to me to do this project in 2011. It was called the Doctors and Pharmacies Call to Action Project, where I delivered Medication and Mother's Breast Milk books to every pediatrician, OB-GYN, and 5 pharmacies in Will County that serve Medicaid patients at WIC. And also I left a copy at 2 of the local libraries so that people could also refer to it as a reference tool. I delivered the books and showed the doctors how to use it. Some of the waiting times to be able to see those doctors were between 1 and 2 hours because they wouldn't take appointments. So I was actually standing next to the pharmacy or the formula reps, which was kind of funny, because I didn't want it to ever be that somebody didn't have access, that somebody would quit breastfeeding just because they didn't know what the safety rating was on their meds. So I wanted it to be available. And this is, of course, before we had apps and Facebook and Mommy Meds and infant risk sender number. So it was very helpful for the patients. So when I did breastfeeding classes, we usually had a 50% show rate, and it started off with paper surveys, which led to using the whiteboard, which then evolved to group discussions and initiatives. So at the beginning, I had like 4 sheets one-sided of surveys of all these questions I asked. I shortened that to 2 pages and then kept it down to 1, and then I just asked a couple questions and I put these things up on the whiteboard. So if we had 10 patients, I would put their intentions, how long they plan to breastfeed for, what their biggest fear or what they saw stop them from achieving their goals, past breastfeeding experiences. This was very instrumental in how my classes changed, because I was obviously looking at why they were quitting, and I was educating to help fight against those things. Why people did not breastfeed. I asked about the client's health conditions, medications, birth control, as well as, and this is big too, upcoming surgeries and dental work. So I actually had a list of like the different medications that most people would be put on with the safety ratings next to them that they were able to take home. I wanted to know when they were returning to work or school, what type of work they did, and many of them gave me the names of their employers. So I did share law cards with them, but I also, if the patients asked me to, I would go to their employers and do presentations to their HRs, their human resource groups. And then from that, some places would actually build or add existing benefits to where women pumped. I always asked if they had questions that didn't get answered, and then what their favorite pieces of breastfeeding info was. My classes were usually an hour long, and if they wanted to stay after and ask questions, they could. The patients usually didn't complain about that, but staff did. So I put a section in that survey asking if the class was too long, what would they do differently? And I also asked if they would like information on becoming a peer counselor. So I always had a list of people that we can offer the trainings to. And what's really cool about when you have a group discussion about all these classes is it just brought the statistics and patterns of bias to life. And we were actually seeing it in the group, because obviously you can see when African-American patients were sharing their stories, Latinas were sharing their stories, and we're all witnessing this at the same time in real time. So you could see where there's patterns of issues within certain hospital departments, as well as just the way that things were running, whether it be at their jobs or at the hospital. So after those classes, my task was to advocate and create change with whatever the client shared. So I figured out before I took this position by looking at all of the people that were breastfeeding, like the 6-week breastfeeding list, that I had talked to about 17,000 people over the course of all those classes in 17 years. And some of the issues that kept surfacing were clients felt that JJC lacked pump sites and privacy. Employers were unaware of breastfeeding laws, and pumping took place in bathrooms. Daycares needed breast milk storage and preparation education, as well as feeding on demand information. Crock pots were being used for heating, and there were feeding schedules that were being used. And if they were trying to feed a baby and the baby wasn't hungry, if the baby's lips touched the bottle, they would throw out all of that milk because they were treating breast milk as if it were formula. And there was one situation that presented itself where a daycare provider was going to not allow the baby to come back because the baby kept throwing up at school. And it turned out that it wasn't that the baby was sick, but the baby was getting overfed. So I contacted the director and told her the circumstances, because the mom had told me the baby never throws up at home, but the baby is throwing up day after day at daycare. And they told me if it happens one more time, the baby can't come back until the baby is well. And so I ended up doing a little mini conference for the staff, because I knew the director of that teen pregnant site, and she allowed me to do a conference. And as I was educating, the person that was causing the baby to vomit was getting very squeamish. And then she raised her hand and she was like, "I think that's me. I think that's what I'm doing to a baby of mine." I was like, "Really? Tell me about that." And so she did. She didn't know that that's why I was there. I was there for her, but so it was nice. And then from that inspired me to go to a lot of other daycare sites. And I had been in the daycare field since, 1991. So I knew a lot of directors, and I had been going to the directors meetings, so it was easy to get put on that circuit. And I also did presentations at Child Care Resource and Referral. So it was very eye-opening. I also found out a percentage of the population was not giving the fat layer on the top of the milk. So that was very disturbing. So we educated on that. Clients' diets were low in vitamin B foods and green vegetables. Hospital night shifts lack breastfeeding coverage or lack supportive staff. One hospital did an audit and found that 70% of the moms were supplementing or quitting breastfeeding by the second night. And a lot of the patients were naming names of hospitals. That was a big thing in the class. And then the client communication preferences. At the beginning of my employment, they wanted, they answered calls and they wanted calls, but towards the end of my employment, texting was the way to go. I was able to send out about 120 texts in about 10 minutes, and I was getting 86% response rates. So even though that sounds awesome, it is awesome. However, I was also staying at work until like 7:30 at night to be able to respond to those, because when somebody responds to you, obviously, about texting, if you don't text back right away, like you don't want it to go dead, like you want the activity to keep going. So when you responded to all those people, it just was a lot of work to get it all done in real time. One of the projects that I did was the Grandmother's Tea project. I love this concept because the mothers of the women that were going to be trying to breastfeed, or like the mother figure, they have a high influence on if that mom breastfeeds and if she's successful. So I just started doing them. I was buying all the materials and doing projects, and people found out I was doing those projects. And so I hosted 2 at my health department, and then from word of mouth, people found out about them and they asked if I would do them at their site. So when I got there, they had asked me how I got funding from the state to do them, and I told them that I was doing it myself. So the cool thing about that is, because almost every single thing I do, I just do it for free because I'm excited about it. I like my job. And later I was asked to go to Washington, D.C. to present the Grandmother's Tea Project for the American Academy of Pediatrics with the creator of the curriculum, and they paid all my expenses. So that was a cool thing, that even when you're making that investment in what you do, but somehow it always ends up working out. Another thing to create awareness as well as for equity, I attend the Baby Expo. I've been attending ever since 2006, which was their second year. The tables cost $500, and I just called them up and asked them if I could do presentations, breastfeeding classes, and answer questions from the breastfeeding moms, and they let me attend for free. And now I'm a headline presenter. And I've invited the admin for the Joliet Breastfeeding Support Facebook page, as well as the admin to the local Evanston Breastfeeding Support page. She also is a volunteer. Well, she was a volunteer for the breastfeeding classes that we did at Evanston Hospital. And then as far as capacity building, I view capacity building and community building as one and the same. So I work for free. So when people find out you work for free, like people call you, that just makes it easier. So one of the projects I did was the Milk of Life project. As a result of the How to Build a Breastfeeding Community Task Force in Springfield, we had 10 tables of 10 people each of breastfeeding advocates from North Illinois to Southern Illinois, Northern Illinois to Southern Illinois, and they asked us our opinions of what types of projects that we should do to promote breastfeeding. And I was surprised that over 50% of the group of only 100 people, so 50 people out of 100, said that we should focus on parish nursing, which I had never even heard of that. So it's the first time that the state sponsored an initiative for a faith-based, initiative. So I received all of the extra booklets that we had, because a lot of people took the booklets, and I did go out and talk with mosques, synagogues, Catholic, Lutheran, and Christian churches, and mom groups. And when I visited the mosques, I learned you can't wear your shoes inside. And then I was told that many families thought that breastfeeding was a taboo topic and to not talk about it. Some didn't. And the mosque didn't have any, they didn't have any programs for moms or new parents, or also pregnant moms. So they actually allowed me to invite their moms to MOPS programs and Love Inc., Both of those are Christian organizations, but they didn't have anything that serviced their pregnant moms or their moms that, their new moms. So that was something that, we did. I talked about, I learned a lot of different stuff, but I talked about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. From Genesis 49:25, it says, "For the God of your fathers bless you with the blessings of the heavens above, the ground beneath, the breast and the womb." The God of your fathers refers to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So that's how I kind of tied that in with feeling comfortable to invite them to the Christian churches. And then they educated me that, Christians call Hagar in the Bible, they call her Hajar. And then they told me that the Green Prophet says to breastfeed for 2 years, and a lot of them weren't able to make it to 2 years. So we definitely wanted to provide education there. I started studying Hebrew as well in this whole process, and I was really intrigued by the fact that the word for womb in Greek means hysteria, but the same word in Hebrew means compassion. I started praying for my patients, and a lot of the people at the health department also were helping me pray for patients too. And I started calling this place called Bill Winston Ministries to pray for my patients as well. Over the course of getting the interpreters, I've also learned words in Arabic, and like just a couple of them. Jabal means mountain. It's one of the words that I use when I'm teaching. Al-Wadi means gosh, what is it? Valley. Also, Halia means cell. So like when I drop those terms, people's hearts get warm towards me because I'm trying to, understand, learn their language. And one of my patients actually brought back Zamzam water for me. So in the story of Hagar, when she left Abraham and Sarah, she went into the desert with Ishmael, and a well sprang up. So that well is I can't actually see it. Oh, here, it's in Mecca in Saudi Arabia. And one of my patients brought me back that water because of me helping her with breastfeeding. So I thought that was really nice. So throughout all this, I met a pregnant woman that spoke Arabic at the health department. She brought her aunt to the breastfeeding class to help translate from English into Arabic. And I was talking to the aunt. I asked her if she wanted to take the breastfeeding peer counselor training. This was during the time that the Joliet Alliance of Breastfeeding Advocates would accept money from the state. And we did regular breastfeeding peer counselor trainings with the community. And we trained this woman as a peer counselor, and she was able to help our Arabic speaking patients. I started offering my services at my church on Sunday for free in our little feeding area. So like when people had issues, it didn't really matter if they were from the community or from the health department. I told them, this is where I'm going to be on Sunday. If you want to show up, I could help you there, and it's in a private room. I also presented at my church for the MOPS group and helped the Love Inc. moms. I started volunteering at Journey Pregnancy and Life Hub and gave breastfeeding classes. And it was there that I learned the power of giving incentives for education. And it really helped take a lot of the work out of the process because people find you when they hear about free stuff.
Janelle, we're about halfway through.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
I was going to say, Janelle, I'm not sure if it will work, but it might make it easier to see if you click on slideshow at the top.
Sure.
If it is easy to do. Okay, go from the beginning, or not from the beginning, from current slide.
Current slide.
Yes, there we go. Yep.
Oh yeah, great. Thank you. Yes, that's what I was trying to do from before. So I give free advice on Facebook pages, and I was able to help give a postpartum breastfeeding education. And this woman, I helped her rent a pump at Evanston because her hospital in the area was out of pumps. She ended up being able to breastfeed and save her supply. So she's been a huge donor of baby clothes, diapers, money. She's also in charge of philanthropy at Exelon, which is where she works, and they do a matching program. So she ended up donating money to my organization, Milk of the Heart, Inc., and they matched all of her funds, which was really cool. So as far as like community building, I met her on the Facebook page. She ended up saying thank you to me on that Facebook page, and it just kind of like, grows notoriety for what you're doing. And a lot of people have donated to me from that Facebook page as a result of, things like this. So when I get unique requests from some of my patients, I also go to the Facebook pages and I ask my patients or clients from the community if I'm allowed to share certain tidbits of information, nothing that's identifiable to that patient, but just situational. So if, I've gotten requests for cribs, I've gotten requests for infant monitors and stuff like that. So when people need stuff that is going to help them with breastfeeding, I end up posting, and I tend to get them donated. There's been situations where patients have been all out of their breast milk storage bags, and we've been able to get we've been able to get breast milk storage bags. They've only had Tupperware, sorry. And we've been able to get breast milk storage bags for them to be able to use. And I've had partners that I've met on Facebook literally mail me stuff to send to my clients and patients. I have a physician donor who found out about me on Facebook as well. And they ended up donating diapers, wipes, vitamin D drops to my patients that took the breastfeeding class over a period of 3 years. And on occasion, they will have like a wine and cheese night and invite me over, and all of their friends end up filling out my car with donations. So I actually am going to see that physician at the end of the week. A doctor's outreach that I did, I ended up just bringing over like triage kits that they kept by the phones. I thought that was going to be helpful, but it ended up where they just ended up referring me a lot more patients, which is fine. And then I recently discovered honorarium. So I have been asking for honorariums because out of all of the the baby bags that I gave out, I've given out a little over 700 bags while being employed here at Evanston. And I'm starting to run out now. I have like under 20 bags. So the honorarium that I'm getting from this presentation, I'm actually going to be using to purchase bags. I also did the business case for breastfeeding. This is where I did the HR visits. And then the hospital advocacy project. The state of Illinois printed out these sheets that said I am pleased or I'm disappointed with my hospital experience. So I had my patients fill those out, and then I mailed them to hospital presidents, L&D managers, women's floor managers, and then I kept a copy. And then they were signed by the patient. Their phone numbers were put on there and a baby footprint stamped on them. I'm not aware if anybody ever used those as a state initiative. I know we wanted to do something, but I don't know that we ever did. And then this is just some of the equity education that I have. So this is an action map. Let's see if I could get this off. Okay, so this is of the Joliet Junior College project. So I've joked with my one of my former supervisors, Lauren. She's the scientist that does all of the data on the work at Evanston Hospital, and I always tell her that she sees in bullet points and I see in fireworks. And that's what I mean by this is when I start to do a project, I just really quickly start thinking of all of the people that I have to contact and what I have to get from them. So I thought about, I knew I needed to contact Mark Cregan, who discovered stem cells in breast milk. I wanted to get an email confirming his research. I shared with him my project idea that I felt that if I told the school certain things that had recently been found in breast milk, the stem cells that had been found in breast milk, that they would be supportive of building a pumping site. So he did send me an email. I contacted Joliet Junior College, my women's study professor, who is also head of the women's college, my anthropology teacher. And I let them know that my students were saying that they couldn't breastfeed and return to college because there was a lack of pump sites, and the areas where they could pump would not be private. I contacted Amita and asked for a donated pump, a donated new pump. And at first they said no, because they only do that for WIC. But then I said 13 of my WIC patients were students. And if we could keep the pump there, they'd be able to use it while they were at the school. And then I contacted JABA to let them know, because they were the ones that would be paying me for any of the work that I was doing when I was traveling to and from Joliet Junior College. And then the last person that I told was my boss, because I wanted to make sure that all of these things were in place first before telling her. I have found that if projects like this aren't complete, that it seems overwhelming sometimes when you tell somebody at the beginning, and it might get kiboshed before it even starts. So once I told her, all we really had to do was think about the logistics at that point. So what JJC had asked was, where are we going to put the key? Who will maintain the room? And will there be educational materials provided for the room? So I thought maybe we could take some like 5 minutes to draw action maps of some of the challenges that you are having with potentially connecting to your patients or to your population. So if you wanted to, and I did that on the computer, but normally I just draw circles and I draw lines. I've never put it on the computer before. But if you wanted to think of one of the projects that you want to do and which organizations and which points of contact that you need to get in touch with before you can implement that.
Great. So we can
I'll just
take
look
a
at the
few
time.
minutes. Yeah, we can take a few minutes. And if folks have questions for Janel about this or about anything that she's presented so far, feel free to unmute yourself and ask as well while folks work.
And really why I wanted to give you this time, when I went to the Blueprint for Breastfeeding project down in Chicago that Health Connect One put on, they did something that was very simple, but it worked a different part of my brain, and it was just very expansive. So they just said, draw a picture. They had a bunch of markers out, draw a picture of how you see a breastfeeding supportive community looking. And for whatever the reason, because it was drawing pictures, I was like, like just this lid was taken off me. And when I went back home, I did a bunch of projects because it just was very, I don't know, freeing.
And as folks are working, if anyone wants to unmute themselves and share the challenge that they're thinking about and any sort of connections or folks that they feel like they need to contact, feel free to go ahead and do that. We'll give maybe another minute or so before moving on.
Hi, Janel. Oh, hi, this is Amy Howell. We've met before on Facebook because I'm originally from Joliet, and we've met on the Facebook group, and I started working as peer counselor a couple of years ago, and I don't know if you remember me, but I do. We've texted back and forth several times, and I've always been able to come to you when I had questions and things, so I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I just want to say I really loved your story about the medications in mother's milk. I had a similar experience recently, actually, probably within the last 6 months, where I went to my doctor because I was having horrible anxiety. And once I told her I was breastfeeding, she said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can prescribe you if you're breastfeeding." And I said, "Oh no, yes, there is." And so being what I do, I pulled out my phone and I showed her which medications were safe. And I just thought it was unbelievable that a doctor wouldn't have that resource in their office. So I do plan definitely to do something like that in my community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Great. And it's something like, it's not like none of these things are huge. It just, if you make it available to them, then obviously all of the people that they're telling that to, if they said that to you, they're telling it to a lot of people.
Right. And that's what I felt. I felt, what if this had been somebody dealing with postpartum depression? My little one is already into toddlerhood, and it wouldn't have been a big deal to wean if it really was an issue, but of course it wasn't. But I thought if this was a new mom dealing with postpartum depression or something, that could have ended her breastfeeding right there.
Exactly. Does anybody mind if I go to the next slide?
Minister Angelique, did you want to say something?
Oh,
quick?
sorry.
Oh yeah, I just had a comment. Janel, you and I worked on we were co-leads on a program, project with the Illinois State Breastfeeding Committee. That was how many years ago? What you doing?
It was a long time ago. It was probably 2014, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah, you know what?
It was a
You're right.
committee. It was for the Illinois Summit, and it was the committee connecting hospital patients with community resources.
Okay,
So
you're
that,
jogging my memory.
Yeah, that was it was a poster and a business card where different counties can put in. So the poster was supposed to go up in the hospital, and the business card was supposed to be with the people. There was a QR code, and everybody's individual county would be able to connect their hospital patients with the community resources.
Yeah.
So that poster and card is still in existence at the print shop. People would be able to get it printed for their county if they wanted.
Oh, you have to. I was looking for that, but my comment was, I'm laughing. I think it was 2015 because now you remember me. I had reminded me I had just finished ministry school. So the comment I want to make, you said I called this place called Bill Winston Ministries, and I know Dr. Odoms is laughing because do you know that is my pastor?
I didn't.
Do you know that's
I did
how
not
Precious
know.
Jules Mom's Ministries got started?
I did not know that. That's so awesome.
That is what Precious Jules Mom's Ministries is about, prayer. So we don't just provide breastfeeding support, but yes, Dr. Bill Winston, that's my spiritual father. So I'm laughing
awesome.
like, you're like, I just called this place. I was like, oh Lord. So yeah, that's a coincidence.
I called it because I saw a YouTube video where he talked about Genesis 49:25, and I had already been researching that scripture, and I was like, that's my pastor. So then I went to his church when they have that faith week.
Every year we have our International Faith Conference.
Yeah. And I still watch some of his sermons. But yeah, definitely. And even now when I am dealing with something at work, if I want to get in to see a patient and I think I might be stopped, or if a patient, like for example, we're going to get to a slide below where a patient called me to come and I did, but I wanted the patient to deliver. So I was like praying, and then I called the ministry and I was like, I really needed to get into this patient. So I do pray for a lot of different reasons.
But how often are you praying? I mean, I'm just curious. It doesn't really matter.
I mean, weekly and daily.
When I say praying, is the patients asking for prayer, or are you more feeling like, and by the way, I do train our leaders on prayer, just FYI.
Yes.
Are you just feeling this lead to prayer? It doesn't matter. I was just curious.
I feel led to pray, but then I'm praying for the patient. And in some situations, I do pray with the patient as well. But I always find out first if the patient is a believer or not. And I try to be respectful of their belief system, which is why I started learning about Hebrew and the Quran and different, the surahs that are in it, to talk to them about that aspect. Because it does make oxytocin, so.
Yes.
Janel, we have about 5 minutes left.
Sure.
You're going to wrap up. Thanks.
Okay, so now we'll move on to my work over at Evanston. Exclusive breastfeeding rates for all patients were 67%. For our community health clinic, 26.5%. So there was a really large disparity between the two. I'm going to kind of shorten it up. These are the things that when Lauren did surveys of what the patients wanted, They wanted continuity of breastfeeding support across perinatal period, convenient prenatal breastfeeding class times, regular contact with a lactation expert before and after delivery. They wanted to address language and transportation barriers to breastfeeding education and post-breastfeeding, post-discharge breastfeeding follow-up help. And this is our program model. And this is what we offer. I'm going to kind of let you read that so I can get through it a little bit. So as you could see, the baseline 5% of the patients were getting prenatal breastfeeding education. Post-implementation, it went to 84%. It went from 12 to 55% for breastfeeding counseling after delivery, 21 to 31% for exclusive breastfeeding prior to hospital discharge. And any breastfeeding prior to hospital discharge went from 86 to 89%. And any breastfeeding at 6 weeks went from 29 to 65%. So as you could see across all of the different cultural backgrounds, disparities were helped. So I asked a bunch of prenatal breastfeeding questions because I actually was coming into the hospital with some biases, just because up until I worked at a hospital, sometimes the hospital was the enemy. So it took me a little bit, it was a challenge to kind of remove that from my brain. But I ended up finding out that from the prenatal breastfeeding classes that the intentions were higher than I had thought they would be. Formula intentions were where there was a lack of awareness of workplace legislation and breastfeeding education with past pregnancies. There were low rates of breastfeeding with preterm babies, obesity, and diabetes from past pregnancies, and a lack of awareness of delayed cord cutting, delayed bathing, skin-to-skin importance, and first feeds, as well as hand expression and rooming in. And a lot of the patients weren't connected to community networks and resources. And with the postpartum questions that I ask after they deliver, skin-to-skin wasn't being delivered systematically. Postpartum breastfeeding support varied with the patients that had special circumstances, and the first feed start and stop times were not being recorded. And I felt from interviewing the patients that the first feeds needed to be longer with little to no interruptions. So these are some of the projects that I did. The blue ones that are highlighted are the ones that I'm most proud of. And this is an example of a text that I would send or an IM message that I would send somebody to get them to call me back, so that they knew that if they took my breastfeeding class, they would be getting a baby bag full of baby items. These are some of the simple teaching tools that I use. I draw pictures, a lot of hands-on examples, and I tell stories. This was actually, so after they watch the videos that I direct them to, they have to give me an idea per video of something that they learned. So this was the example of one of the mom's main ideas so that she could get her baby bag. So we know that they are actually watching the videos. This is actually an example of one of the slides that I share. I show the value. So we get people that sometimes say, I just got 1 ml or I only got 1 ml. So I showed them what the value of 1 ml is in the market. So 1 ml is $65 in 2017. It went up to $138 in 2019. If you know the age and race of the woman, it's $240. And now, this is before COVID though, $358 for 1 ml. So then people are like, what? What's in that? And so then I tell them. So this was kind of cute. I also ask patients after they take the class and watch the videos, what was your favorite piece of information? And this woman wrote, all information was helpful, but finding out how many cells that the breast milk can replicate and that each one has a benefit for the baby's body is amazing. It helps babies be healthy, plus it reduces the risk of ear infections and other problems like obesity. So I would say video number 1. I thought that was cute. This is an example of another slide that I share with education. This is before COVID, after COVID, or before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. And I give education on antibodies with that. Paul Zak is a neuroeconomist that discovered that narratives can cause oxytocin release. If you go to this link, you'll be able to get more of the data on the research that he's done. So I share photo narratives. I asked the patient's permission to share this. This woman wanted those to be shared because she wanted to uplift the spirits of some of the moms that she knows that I help. And as you could see, she had been pumping every 3 hours and saw nothing. And literally within 5 minutes of my presence in her room, I was able to get out 1 ml out of each breast. And she was like, oh my gosh. And so then she kept doing hand expression and pumping. She had heard that she was supposed to hand express and pump, but she wasn't, she was only pumping up to this point. And then she started seeing results. This is a teenager that called me to her delivery in the first hour. I was able to get 2 and 2 mLs, 2 out of each breast. She followed it up because she knew she had colostrum now, and she hand expressed 2 and 2 and then pumped 3 and was doing that every 2 to 3 hours. By 3 days later, she was making 50 mLs, 4 days later, 70 mLs every single time that she pumped. And she delivered a 33-week baby. 2 days, the baby went to the ISCU.
And Janelle, do you want to take just 1 minute to wrap up?
Sure. So
Okay,
the rest
perfect.
of the
Thanks.
pictures are really just some of what I use to inspire people to actually do the work, because sometimes with pumping, they see nothing. And this is actually of a woman that did not want to breastfeed. I talked to her one day, and then the following day, that same day I said, so, do you want to try breastfeeding? And she said, I do. I want the skin to skin thing, and I want the first feed. And I said, okay. So the baby was born preterm, so the baby ended up going to the ISCU, but she ended up calling me the very next day. It was actually at night, but I came into work anyways, because you can't talk someone into breastfeeding and then not help them. So we ended up getting the most that I have ever gotten out, 8.2 mLs. In the presence of her sister and mom, they were talking about their successful breastfeeding experiences. And when the doctor asked her how she planned to feed, she said she planned to try this breastfeeding thing. And during her hospital stay, she did end up only pumping and or hand expressing 4 times. But this was a woman that only wanted to formula feed. So I look at that as a success.
Thanks so much, Janelle.
Yeah. And that's my why. My son, he was breastfed for 4 years. And I just think it's cool that I didn't want to breastfeed, and it ended up turning into a career. So
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was so great to hear all of the amazing work that you're doing. So just to wrap us up before we close out in the next 2 minutes or so, I put a link in the chat for our post survey or our feedback survey for this event. So please do take a second to take that. It should only take about a minute or 2, and it really helps us improve the events that we host and kind of, host events with topics that you're most interested in. So we would appreciate any feedback that you have. We will be submitting this presentation for continuing education credits, so stay tuned. We're not able to share which ones we'll be receiving until they're approved, and so we'll just have to wait and share those out with you once they're approved. Janelle, it looks like someone's wondering if you can post your contact information in the chat. So if you're able to do that, I think that would be helpful. I think some folks want to follow up with you, which is amazing.
sure.
And then I'll be sharing the recording with folks who registered for the event. And so you'll have access to that in the next couple of days. And then we encourage you to stay connected with us as well. So I'll put our Instagram and our website in the chat in case you're interested in following along with us. And then whenever you're ready to head out,
I was going to say, Marjorie,
Yes.
even though I know that we're going to go into the next phase,
yeah,
but let's take 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, sure.
I know it's
Absolutely.
ending, like it's right at 5 o'clock. If people have 1 or 2 questions, I know some will head out, but we are, open to take 1 or 2 questions for those that are interested.
Sure.
And Janelle as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so if anyone has a question, feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself. Or if you'd like me to read it, you can go ahead and put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Kathy
Hey,
Ragland.
Kathy.
Hi, Janelle. Just wanted to thank you for a wonderful presentation. And, you and I worked together out in
Yes.
Joliet. So
Yes,
we were a
we
nice
did.
partnership. I was at the hospital and you were at the health
was
department.
great.
But it really just shows how with that continuity of care and all of the community organizations collaborating, with WIC and me being at the hospital, we
was
can
awesome,
make
yeah.
it. Yeah. Yep. So thank you. It's good to reconnect.
Yeah, it is nice to reconnect. Kathy actually would invite me to do CAN TV, and she also invited me to go to her breastfeeding support group, and I was able to teach classes over there. So it was always nice to have that collaboration.
We did. And we called ourselves Oprah and Jennifer Lopez. So it was so nice. It was a nice connection.
It was.
Any other questions or comments for Janel?
Janelle, do you do any of your breastfeeding classes online now, like over Zoom or anything like that?
I have done classes on Zoom, and I also, if some people are challenged in that way, I take screenshots and I either IM them or text them, and then I'm talking to them, referring to my pictures. They also watch videos. So like the videos there's 13 total videos. They're 1 to 3 minutes in length. One of them is 7 minutes. A few of them are 19 minutes. They literally watch all those videos and they send me their main ideas.
Great. Any last questions or comments at all? Thanks again, Janelle. It looks like everyone's
Thank you.
appreciated your perspective. And I would ask, if you are an iSpan grantee with us, please do stick around. We'll have our regular Learning Collaborative meeting starting in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me. It was really nice. It was nice to actually go back down memory lane too.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
And for folks who are here for Janelle's portion, feel free to sign off whenever you're ready. Thanks again, Janelle, and I'm sure folks will connect with you in the near future. And Janelle, I can get your contact information too and share that out with the group via email if you're willing to share that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
I did
Janelle.
share it on there. Did you need it in some other way? You want to just share it from the email?
I can share your email in a follow-up email as well, just in case folks want it that way too. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to X out. Bye, everybody. Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Thank you again.
Bye. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Angela. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janelle.
Okay.
All right, so why don't we do a 2-minute break before we start our NOHI iSpan Learning Collaborative meeting. So again, if you're not here for that, feel free to sign off. We'll just be doing some business as usual with our grantees, nothing too exciting. And then if you're here for that, feel free to take a 1 or 2 minute break until just after 5:05, and then we'll reconvene.